Hello and welcome to the Masters of Venice. This is your guide, your art guide, Adele. And I'm excited today because we've been learning a lot about the early history of Venice, the Byzantine influence, and kind of the late Gothic styles with some of our last articles on the artexpeditiontours.com blog, as well as the videos I've done. But today we're going to kind of go full into the Renaissance with one of the most important artistic families in the history of Italy, really, and in the Western art. And they set the destiny for Venice in many ways by creating a foundation. This is the Bellini family. And you've noticed, we talked about the Vivarini family. If you read the blog, and you can find it on the Masters of Venice course, we have a lot of blog articles about the history of Venice that we're going through in addition to the videos. That was also a tight knit family as well. So a lot of these artists, would work in tandem and learn from their fathers and their brothers and things like that, which is cool. So the Bellini family, it starts with the father, Jacopo, and he was truly one of the first innovators in Venetian art when it came to kind of moving towards the linear perspective style of art. That was what Masaccio and Brunelleschi in Florence had figured out a method to kind of like a mathematical almost method to create this perspective. And I always think about the two train lines start off wide and in the distance they get smaller and smaller. That's what we see in real life, and that's perspective. And the ability to paint that, there's kind of like a mathematical way to figure it out. And they really started using this to create increase realism in the Renaissance. So Jacopo, he actually started studying. He was born in 1400. He started studying with kind of this master painter who came to Venice and from 1405 to about 1420. His name was Gentile Fabriano de Fabriano. Very well renowned. He'd been kind of around different parts of Italy. He was originally from Umbria. And Jacopo started studying with him, when he was younger. And it was like 1420, around that time, Jacopo, actually, Gentile de Fabriano was called to Florence, the seat of the Renaissance, kind of where this burgeoning movement was happening and linear perspective and all of that, to do one of Fabriano's greatest pieces, which is in the Uffizi. It's called The Adoration of the Magi. And it's a late Gothic type style. And we're going to do a video on it in the coming weeks. But anyway, because of that and his teacher going there in 1423, Jacopo said, I'm going to go to Florence and I want to learn. I'm going to go to stay with my master there. And there he met all sorts of famous artists that, Ghirlandaio, Masaccio, who was the first to paint with linear perspective. And he studied with all of them and really learned a lot. He brought that back to Venice in 1429. He started his own studio that began to flourish very quickly. He was well regarded by the state, the doges, and the ducal palace. Got a lot of commissions, portraiture, things like that. Also, of course, doing religious art. Unfortunately, a lot of Jacobo's art has been lost. There's a few pieces that are at Venice's Accademia Gallery, and but actually the prizes that we still have from this first Bellini, Jacopo, are his two books of drawings he did kind of over the course of his career. He just like sketches and things like that. And one is in the Louvre and one is in the National Gallery in London. He gave, when he passed in his will, he gave one to each of his sons. And therefore they're now in both of those, each of those museums. But what's cool about these books is they each have a kind of a trans it kind of shows the transition as he started off early and was learning, and over the course of his career he kept kind of like a catalog, so you can see how he was experimenting with linear perspective and things like that. So he brought this to Venice and it became, really took off. He started training other artists as well, working with other artists, especially his son-in-law, Interestingly enough, he was a Paduan, very famous artist as well, known as Mantegna. Montaigne was friends with Donatello because Donatello worked in Padua. Padua is like maybe an hour. It's really not that far from Venice. It's in the Veneto region. So this kind of area through his son-in-law, he met, Donatello and things like that, and so did his sons. And it was just the circle of influence and learning, right? Exchange of ideas. He had two sons who were artists, Gentile and Giovanni, and both were very famous and renowned. Giovanni's more famous probably today just because there's more breadth of his work. But they were both equally important and had some unique styles that they attributed to. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show you this painting is one that was done mostly by Gentile, possibly some work done with his brother. They did work together some, and it's kind of part of this cycle that was done for this scuola, the Scuola of San Giovanni de Battista, the St. John the Baptist. And I'll pause real quick because a scuola is basically means school in Italian, but it was like a confraternity or a civic organization where people of different backgrounds or like similar backgrounds would come together for, it could be like charitable work, it could be because they both or maybe like in the art guild or something, and they decided to create a school, and it normally had a patron saint. But they were big, these scuolas really valued art, and they would always be one of the major patrons of art in Venice. So all of these scuolas, even today, you can visit a lot of them in Venice. You can see the art of some really like masters from Bellini to Tintoretto and stuff, just visiting these scuolas. But this particular cycle was the Legend of the True Cross, which the True Cross was the cross that Jesus died on. The legend and the truth of behind the legend is that Saint Helena, Constantine's mother, when Christianity was legalized, she went to Jerusalem, got all these relics, and she investigated, all of this, and she found out where the true cross was, the cross that Christ was actually crucified on. It had been buried, and there's this whole like story behind it that was written down early on. And there's pieces of this true cross, just tiny pieces throughout Europe and even the world, right? So, but it's a relic that you can venerate. And for instance, my local parish has a relic of this true cross. It's just like a little splinter from it. But they had one in Venice, and it was a big deal. And they kept having these miracles happen around the true cross. So the Scuola of St. John the Baptist decided we want to commission Gentile Bellini to do an entire cycle of stories about this true cross and miracles of the true cross. And this is one of them. We'll see another one in a second. But as you can see, it's amazing, the detail. You feel like you're right there in Venice. And actually, a lot of historians like to look at this as like a historical account of how people dressed or kind of how the city looked, because it is so detailed. And much of Venice hasn't like completely changed. It's changed some, but it kind of gives you an idea of, you could see kind of the Venetian style windows and all of these people. So the story with this painting is essentially that they're having a procession in like the 1300s of the True Cross, and going over the San Lorenzo Bridge, because Venice is connected by bridges. And fortunately, as you can see, there are a lot of crowds. It's like if you're going to a big event like the fair or something, you get pushed around and the cross fell into the water and people are panicking. Um, you see this one person like on the side of the building, like about to jump in. People are running in the water trying to get in, but nobody could get the cross until this guy who was in charge of the Scuola of St. John jumped in, and it just like miraculously came to him. So the story goes, and you can kind of see him. He's the one who's like floating with the relic in his hand. So there's a huge realism here, but there's also this like ethereal side to it. So this was work by Gentile, and it was done about 1500s when it was completed. Right, not too long after before he died. And all the Bellinis had very long lives, like into their 80s. So they have a pretty good collection of the sons for sure. That they and you can kind of see how they progress throughout their life as they continue to adapt to new styles and understanding about art. It's also important to recognize too to mention that the Bellinis were some of the first artists in Italy to take on oil painting. Oil was very new medium before they were using tempera, kind of like, or with egg mixture, or fresco, on the wall. So this was kind of new, and it wasn't it was different than like mosaic style. So essentially, oil painting originated in like the Netherlands. Jan van Eyck, he was one of the first Netherlandish painters to use it. And because Venice was a center of trade and they traded extensively with everyone from even up to England, to the Netherlands, to other Italian city states like Naples, they were always getting the latest and the greatest when it came to new technology. And they were also sharing their technology. So oil kind of painting came in through their close connections with the Netherlands, but also an artist, Antonello da Messina, who had been in Naples. He had been exposed to oils, possibly when he was traveling up north in northern Europe, and he brought them to Venice. And actually, Giovanni and Gentile kind of worked alongside of him some. So this is when you really see a marked change from kind of this tempera style to oil, which was a much more consistent and medium for creating these really detailed paintings. So here's another painting by Gentile, and also his brother worked on this and finished it when Gentile died. And it's this super detailed depiction of this procession of the True Cross in St. Mark's Square. I mean, look at St. Mark's. You can even see the mosaics in there, the detail, the ducal palace. You even see the tile work. I mean, it's remarkable. It's really alive, and it even captures like looks like there's even like construction going on in the background. It really shows you the moment and how Venice was as a historical document as well as art. What's interesting to me about this painting is you figure out it's a procession, but you don't necessarily figure out the miracle unless you look really closely. There is a miracle that's happening in this painting. They're having this procession of the True Cross. Everybody's just following along. Everybody's on the square, and then this guy comes, and this is based on a true story of a miracle. He comes and he's venerating the cross, and he says, "Please save my son. He's dying." And when he goes home, his son is completely healed. And this became a written down account of a miracle. But you don't really see that as the forefront here, because I think it's really trying to get you caught up in the scene and also kind of ask you the question, are there miracles happening all around us? And like we just don't even pay attention and notice, which is kind of interesting. It's getting you, this art is always meant to bring you into a conversation, to make you think, especially the religious art, kind of to meditate and to think about the themes. How does this speak to you and your own relationship with God, which is why it's so powerful, right? So his brother, Giovanni, actually they both had distinguished careers, but Giovanni's a little bit more well known in terms of his art being distributed to other countries outside of Italy. He was known for painting these beautiful Madonnas. He painted them each one so differently, like you can recognize it's his style, but it's like you never get tired of looking at them because they all have this like different account of Mary, which is, you kind of think about our own lives. Each moment we have a different maybe emotion or feeling depending on what we're going through, hope, sadness, fear. And he's able to capture that really well. Both of these are in the academia, but in Venice. But one thing you'll notice is that Bellini was one of the first to bring in kind of this naturalism and the scene into the art, especially with the saints and Mary. So in the background, you see like the Alps in the distance from the Venetian mainland, the Dolomites, and then Dolomites. And then you like in this one, the one on the right is probably my favorite. It's Madonna of the Trees. And Jesus is just like trusting his mom, and she's just holding on to him tight, and has this pensive, loving care and gaze, very, at peace, but then kind of also aware she has to protect him. She's the motherly figure. But in the back, you have these two trees, and then there's like this panel behind her, which was very unique. And he was the first to use this kind of green panel and bring in the trees. So it's meant to kind of bring heaven down to earth. So you really feel like you're engaged, or this could be in your backyard, when you're praying or thinking about the painting. So we'll kind of close off this quick overview of the Bellinis today, though, with one of my favorite portraits that Giovanni did, and all of the Bellini family was really good at portraiture. They were official portrait painters of the Doges, basically the constitutional monarchs of the Republic of Venice. And this is one of Doge Lorenzo Lucan, and it is in the National Gallery in London. I've seen it in person. I was 19 and I was just blown away by this painting. I was like, this looks like a photograph. Is this a painting? It's just so detailed. Like, you would never need another photograph of this person. It's just so perfect. So I'll just kind of leave you with that to meditate on it. You can learn more about the Bellini family on the blog. I did an in-depth article on it, artexpeditiontours.com, or follow us on Facebook at Art Expedition Tours. And look forward to continuing the Masters of Venice with you next time.